start today a little differently. I may be doing some things differently over the next few weeks. It's my chance, even if I blow it, you know. The soft landing. And so the topic for today is about an imperfect life, which is already sort of incongruous with the way we normally talk about things here. There's a meaning to my madness, and I want to begin with a poem by Mary Oliver called Wild Geese. And so I've asked Linda Kerr to come up. You can use this microphone right here if you like.
Sounds good. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft body of your animal body love what it loves. Tell me about your despair, and I'll tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees and the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world is offering itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.
Thank you. The world is waiting for us to announce ourselves in the family of things, and there is a tendency for many of us to get stuck in life, yes? And one of the joys that I have as a minister and have had for these 22 years has been to help people push through their perceived stuckness and to help them listen to perhaps a still small voice that is encouraging them, and to encourage them to listen to that voice and to give sway to an impulse to grow, an impulse to expand one's territory of expression. And if there is one thing that can transform a life, it is when people discover a deeper purpose and the gift that they have in order to fulfill it. It's been my greatest joy as a minister. And I think it's been my greatest joy because it was my greatest joy to have that happen in my own life. And so I want to talk today about that. But the emphasis for this is not just the Joseph Campbell axiom of, follow your bliss. But what he didn't say, maybe he did somewhere along the line, but that when you follow your bliss, it may be hard. It may be difficult. You may fail. And again, because that's where a lot of people call off the search. That's when a lot of people cancel their plans to pursue this impulse, this dream, because they think that they've maybe misread the tea leaves. But I'm here to say is that whatever is deep and alive in you is going to have to push through your humanness, your limits, your story of not enough, your story of inadequacy, your story of not believing sufficiently in yourself, your story of not being familiar with this new way of being and expressing yourself. And so the message of today is there is a perfection in the imperfection. And if we allow that perfection to continue to be nurtured, then we will come to discover the life that has been waiting to be expressed through us. Bronnie Ware wrote a blog about 10 years ago that ended up becoming a very best-selling book. In the blog, she had worked with dying patients. Not in the blog, she had not worked with dying patients, but she had recounted her experience of working with dying people over a period of 10 years. And that what she kept hearing from people who were approaching this transition point in their life was there was a pattern to the regrets they were expressing, things that they said over again that they wished that had been different or they had done differently in their life. And so she wrote these 5 things down and shared it in her blog. And she had so much feedback, so many people writing to her, and she ended up putting it in a little book. And it's the kind of book I like to read. It had 792 words in it, which is about how long my attention span is oftentimes. But, if you're really saying something, you don't have to say a lot. And she was really saying something, or these people had really said something, and it really sparked a nerve in people who read it. So I'll let you look up the others, but I want to focus on the number one. And the number one regret was, I wish that I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life that others expected of me. Amen? Yeah. I think we can all relate to that. So it's really important, I think, no matter how old you are, whether you're approaching the end of life or whether you're a young person, to live with the intention to follow what would be a regret if it had not been done, if it was not followed. I think so many of us, we grow up to please those who raise us. And although there's very good reasons for that in the consequence of our wanting to get along and to survive, perhaps, in our families and in our early childhood and even in our society and amongst our peers, there is something very inauthentic about, obviously, living and being motivated by how others respond to us. Because you and I have our own knowing. You and I are made in the image and likeness of God, and we are all unique expressions of the One. And that unique expression of who you are is the purpose of your individual life. And knowing that needs to be, if we are to live a life that is without regret, knowing that is our North Star. It is our guiding light. It is constantly calling us to pay attention. It's not there capriciously. God does not put a desire in your heart. I'm not talking about a whim, but a deep profound, never leaves you quite alone desire, capriciously, it is there so that you might fulfill the uniqueness of your mind and your body and your talents and your gifts in a world that would blossom, would be greater for you having shared it. We know this very well when we see great artists or great singers, musicians, because we can't imagine that they wouldn't share that gift. Can't imagine even a world without some of the great art and its great contributions to beauty and truth and imagination and love made manifest. And yet we're a little bit more forgiving, or perhaps totally forgiving of ourselves for not being equally listening, equally responsive to that calling. So I myself, as I've shared with you before, was a very shy and self-conscious child. And I grew up in a family where it was not safe for me to speak up. Some of you may be able to relate. And the consequence of that is that although I had something to say and I had feelings, I learned that to not express those feelings would bring peace in the household. At least it would avoid the negativity, the corrections, the scolding or the punishment, if I was being true to myself. Well, the consequence of that, of course, is that I took it too far. You know what I'm saying? Yes, children should not be allowed to say everything that they feel and think, because that would not be a household any of us would want to live in. But if you take it too far and you just sort of just clamp down on the whole idea of speaking everything that you're feeling and thinking, because the prospect of possibly there being negative consequences around that sort of self-expression, then you're shutting down not only the stuff that could be properly censored, but you're shutting down the vein of your own spirit, your own being, your own life. So I grew up being afraid of expressing myself verbally, not just even in front of large groups like this, but also in my family, as I said, and even among a few friends. And I had this great fear and apprehension that I was always questioning myself. I was always, unsure of myself, and I was afraid that I might have misspoke or I hadn't said it right, and I became this extraordinary diplomat, very good with finding ways of making peace. And this carried over into education, so I would be sitting in class, and I would never raise my hand. I was fearful of someone calling on me, a teacher calling on me. And my heart would beat in my chest, even thinking about asking a question. So how did I end up here? The first 40 years of my life, I kept my head down and my mouth shut, because it would be far too risky to make a mistake, to mess up. This desire that I had that never really went away to express myself was eclipsed by the fear of the consequences. Does anyone relate to this? Okay. We all have our version of this. And it wasn't until my heart broke open about 25 years ago, sitting in a place like this, that I realized that my need to express myself was not even a choice anymore. It wasn't something that I could contain anymore. And that I felt that I had the whole universe behind me, in doing this work and sharing these teachings, which eventually led to me becoming a minister. But it wasn't to say that that moment that I realized that everything became an easy path, or that there wasn't difficulties or self-doubt, a lot of self-doubt, or that I suddenly became a confident, articulate spokesperson for this teaching. This is what so often I think we end up with these affirmations that I think are a misunderstanding of this dynamic. Such things as, if you're really following your heart, everything will work out, and it'll be, the way will be made easy for you. Nothing could be further from the truth. Because most of us who are really sitting on some very deep, desire to express ourselves in a particular way, or to be more authentically who we are, is behind some of the biggest doubts that we have. And the breaking through of which is going to feel a lot like childbirth, as little as I personally know about that, but what I've heard, and some of the screaming that I've heard happening when people are giving birth, that absolutely is part of the process. And that doesn't mean that it's not valid and it doesn't need to be followed. And being willing to make a mistake in pursuit of your passion is absolutely part of the journey. How many of you have heard of Brené Brown? Anyone? Some of you. She's written a number of books, and again, it came from her own experience. And she wrote a book called Daring Greatly, which I commend everyone. And in this book, she came across this quote as she was beginning to shift from working in a business executive position at AT&T and moving into social work, which was a huge shift from left brain, right brain, and all of the doubts came up. What am I doing? And I shouldn't be doing this, and this doesn't make any sense. And, the rational mind was trying to, convince her not to do this. And she began to write about these thoughts that she had about softer matters, and she wrote a blog, and the critics showed up. The critics? And she started getting this sort of negative feedback, and she wondered, maybe this isn't my path. Because if this was what God wanted me to do, certainly it would be well received and everyone would be applauding. But that was not her reality, nor is it for most. And she came across this quote from Theodore Roosevelt that helped her with this. He said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man." Of course, this is not gender specific, but then it was. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows, in the end, the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least knows if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. It's not the feedback we get in pursuit of the authentic expression of ourself is not a barometer of the rightness of our purpose. It's only the way the world, and particularly those who have never been in the arena, those who sit on the sidelines oftentimes are the biggest critics, who have the least understanding of what it takes to do what you are daring to do. Not the voices to listen to. And you know, today with the internet and the chat rooms and the trolls and the blogging and all this stuff that's going on, the conversation is so uncivilized, and so much of what is given attention, as I say, you know, never read the comments at the bottom of your blog, because people somehow get off on putting people down, somehow from maybe their own sense of not doing and taking the steps that it can be taken if they were to live more authentically. It's been a tough journey, but I wouldn't give it up. It's been costly in some very material ways for me and Denise and my family to pursue this, but I've never, ever felt disconnected from the authenticity of my desire to do this work. There's been lots of negative feedback. There's been lots of challenges. There's been lots of days when I really thought, did I make a mistake? But I never, ever felt like this was not mine to do, come what may. So I want to share with you, I listened to this, watched this video clip on YouTube, and you know, with the, do I have it here? Yes, I do. So I watched this video clip of a piano performance of Bohemian Rhapsody by this young woman that she did in the park, and I was so moved by it, and so I listened to it. I shared it with my youngest son, Nathan, who's at Indiana University and plays the piano. And I wrote this, and I said, the recent resurgence of Bohemian Rhapsody via the movie and some incredible YouTube covers has inspired me to pick up the piano again, play the piano. This video I came upon today made me tear up. The song itself is incredibly beautiful, and to watch this young woman become so immersed in the expression and totally unaware of how it has captivated the scattered onlookers, listeners, touched me big time. A down-to-earth version, I talked about a tutorial that I'm going to do. And I said, in the love of music that moves us, Dad. And so here's the clip. Moments of brilliance, yes? And there were mistakes, yes? Yes. Did it slow her down? No. So my response from my son was lots of mistakes and out of tune, but it was still great. And I wrote him back and I said, yeah, I heard those mistakes. And it was her continuing with the same intensity without skipping a beat that I think was so moving. Such a great example of how to tackle life with passion, enthusiasm, energy, courage, forgiveness, perseverance, laudable, applaudable, imperfect human expression in pursuit of self-expression and beauty. The heroine's journey across a black and white landscape, navigating the sharps and the flats, indefatigable until it's over. It's a way to live a life. We're all going to make mistakes in pursuit of even our most gifted nature. Our way of expressing is not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be accepted. And it's not always going to be beautiful. But what's beautiful is listening and giving voice to who we are. Where would the world be if our measure of beauty and truth could only be flawless? Because on our way to what we might say is perfection is a well-worn path of mistakes, of screw-ups, of being not using the right words and the right ways. But in the end, we will not have any regrets if we live the life that has been begging us to be expressed. Brené Brown says, when we spend our lives waiting until we're perfect or bulletproof before we walk into the arena, we ultimately sacrifice relationships and opportunities that may not be recoverable. We squander our precious time and we turn our back on our gifts, those unique contributions that only you can make. And finally, Rumi. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down the dulcimer from the shelf and let the beauty of what you love be what you do. Namaste.